were talking about the Long Shadow on ITVX, and
Yeah,
now
there couldn't be
this
a greater contrast between what you just talked about.
I'm pretty sure there could be and
The
maybe
gulf
that
between these two films is just enormous.
maybe that's the public service that Trolls Band Together does. Like you watch The Long Shadow on ITVX and then you go watch Trolls to perk you back up,
Yeah,
to
way.
pull you back because this is a true
Okay.
crime. It's a true crime thing, and it's based on events that I can imagine you were aware of when they were happening.
I was a lot. Yes, I remember them happening. Yeah,
Yeah,
it goes into the events of um, what's become known as the Yorkshire Ripper
yeah,
and the crimes that man committed
yeah.
in the sort of mid to late 70s, and then it carried on into the early 80s.
Mm.
So I was at school throughout all of that, and so I was aware of it through all of it. Yeah,
Well,
and the
probably being very
the
happy
events.
you don't live in Yorkshire.
Yes, absolutely. So
Yeah.
this is it's a I think it's a seven-parter,
Mm-hmm.
an ITV drama. So it's British based and all, entirely British cast, and I think most of the cast are genuinely northern.
Okay.
They are authentically. I think when I looked at the cast afterwards, like David Morrissey, there's Toby Jones, there's um, Sam Waddington, there's
Toby Jones is Northern.
I maybe he's not northern.
No, no,
Uh,
I'm only going off the roles he plays.
Mark Addy again. So some of them are. I don't think he's northern, but I think his dad was in Emmerdale, so maybe that's why I'm thinking he's northern. He's an honorary northerner. His dad was like a stalwart of Emmerdale.
Yeah.
But it's a great cast, and it's an all British cast. Yeah, and sort of Lee Ingleby, he's not northern, but
Okay.
yeah. So there's a good cast in it. But basically, takes two strands. It looks at the women and their lives and sort of tries to flesh out some of the women who were the victims of this killer.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't deal with their deaths. It literally deals up with the days, with their sort of the lives, and then you may get a glimpse of the night they died, but you don't ever see what happened to them.
Yeah.
And it's described in sort of clinical terms during the police investigation, but you it doesn't dwell on the actual killing. So
It doesn't sort
some
of
of these true
glamorize it. Yeah.
yes, because some of these true crime dramas, it seems to be all about this sort of the death, and
Yeah.
that I think has like an almost pornographic feel about it because they're almost like
100%.
reveling in this gruesomeness. But there's none of that.
Yeah.
So the most you see is that one of the victims may get in a car, you see the car drive off, and that's it. Then the
Yeah.
next day you may see the suggestion of a body or some feet that's in a field that sort of white that obviously are from a body. But
Yeah.
that's all you see. You don't see anything else. So I give it certainly points for that it doesn't dwell on the actual death. But it's mainly from the point of view of yeah, the women, you see their lives, that they had families, they had children, they had husbands, they were part of families,
Yeah.
and also the police investigation. And I think the emphasis on this film is basically what what went wrong, what took them so long.
Mm.
And I think I was interested in this subject basically because there are events that I remember,
Yeah.
and also because obviously I spent 26 years in the police service,
Yep.
and my role was to record and analyse crime as a civilian.
Yep.
So every crime that was committed on the Isle of Wight, I basically knew about. And we did have murders. We only ever had, in 26 years that I was there, we had one stranger murder, i.e., we didn't know who did it at the
Yep.
time of the crime,
Yeah.
and all the others were either domestic or the people were known to each other. So the closest I ever came to an investigation of a crime like this was when we did have a murder where a body was found and we had no idea who was responsible. And so there was a major inquiry, and I was drafted in to answer the phones that day. And we were drafted, I was the runner for the day
Yeah.
because in those days, we didn't have an incident room. We were three of us in my office were told, right, you're manning the phones today. We're going to put a peel out on the 9 o'clock news. We're going to put a peel out at lunchtime. We're going to put a peel out. You just have to answer the phone.
Yeah.
They didn't give us any briefing. We don't know what on earth what they were looking for. They just said, we're going to put the appeal out. Anyone who was in this location at this time, you answer the phone, and then you just make notes according to what the person tells you.
Yeah.
But so I'd spent the whole day doing that, and then the next day they set the incident room up, and we were just relieved. So I have a glimpse into this world. And so
Yes.
basically, in Yorkshire at this time, they had never had a mass murderer. as in more than one stranger murder. And so
Yes.
as the events unfolded and the amount of information they had, they were left with basically this overwhelming amount of information in a pre-digital age. So
Yeah.
there was quite a lot with the police investigation, and basically how they were left with very limited forensics and things. You didn't have like DNA, you didn't have CCTV coverage that we have now that we rely on so much. It's literally the nuts and bolts of the police investigation, down to the like measuring tire tracks and then working out how many possible car types could have that type of tire, and what type of, and then thinking, okay, that narrows it down to 100 makes of car. Potentially in this area, there could be, in this one town, there could be 900 cars of that similar type.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. So it looked at the investigation, but it also looked at how the police dealt with these women. How early on they branded them as, this is a man who goes after prostitutes.
Yeah.
And in almost mitigating to say, well, it's just prostitutes. So you know what? It's not a problem. And then when someone who is not a prostitute was killed, they were described as an innocent victim. And it was just like, well, what were the other 6 women then before that? Were they not innocent victims too? But there was like, they almost like asked for it and they didn't. And
Yeah.
then when women were attacked who weren't prostitutes, and when they said, we think you might be a Ripper victim, they were said, no, absolutely not. I'm not a prostitute. But if you say that I'm a Ripper victim, all my neighbours are going to say you're a prostitute. And that slur on my character is enough, basically, to ruin my reputation and the life of my family in this area. So I was hit over the head with a hammer. Yes, I was stabbed, but I was not a victim of the Ripper. And if you say I was, heaven help you, I'm not going to. And so you've had this judgment placed on the victims of this crime. And
Yes.
and you see that in quite detail. So that is fascinating. I mean, I saw glimpses of that in my policing life. They're people are very judgmental, but I think the key thing about this was that they were so desperate to find this man that I think they tried to make the evidence fit certain suspects and to fit a pattern, even though the evidence was telling them something different. They took the bits that fitted into their preconceived idea of what was going on, and if it didn't fit in that pattern, then they either dismissed it or ignored it, and thereby losing vital evidence and sort of helping to solve this crime.
You see, everything you're saying is just reinforcing the reason why I didn't watch this.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It makes you like, especially there's one poor woman who was assaulted, and because she refuses to, because she says, I'm not a prostitute, I'm just not a prostitute. And they say, well, you're obviously lying. You're obviously lying, so therefore nothing you say can be taken as fact, because you're denying the fact that you're a prostitute, you're therefore unreliable, and we cannot take your testimony, and we cannot use this as part of our investigation. And it's like, well, are you telling her, or are you seeking her information? When you look at that, you sort of go,
Yeah,
yes, you want to scream at the screen.
it's amazing. Even just hear you speak about it, I'm getting a little bit despairing. I'm almost kind of like, it's almost bringing a tear to my eye, because I'm just thinking, oh, good God. It's kind of a similar reason why sometimes I really, really struggle to watch shows that are built around the way, like, if it has to deal with the experience of black people in the 80s in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sure this is very worthy and I'm sure this is brilliant, but I just cannot.
I just don't want to go
I
there.
can't.
Yeah. So I watched this almost against my will, because I started to watch it not realizing what I was getting into, and then once I was watching it, I was just thinking, was pretty damning of that police investigation. I think, I don't know if
Yeah.
they had an agenda when they were making it, but it certainly was pretty damning. And I
Yeah.
think retrospect is an amazing thing, because you can look back and see all the places where you make a mistake, but when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to. You have to have that clear-sightedness. But the fact that Peter Sutcliffe, who was the Yorkshire Ripper, was arrested 9 times, that his vehicle was on file numerous times, that he'd been arrested with a hammer years before in the same area where some of these attacks had been made. Their pieces were all there. It was just getting that. But they had like thousands upon thousands of vehicles that had been logged. They had spoken to thousands of men. So the information was all there, and they had something like 40 these identical pictures and sketches that all look exactly like him, but he just managed to just evade it because basically he was an ordinary guy. They were looking for a monster.
They were looking
They
for
were looking for
somebody with
something.
fangs and a twirling mustache who walked around in a
Yeah,
cape and a top hat.
they were looking for their villain, their monster, this evil incarnate. And this was a guy who you would have not looked at if you'd passed him in the street. You would. So the monsters are among us because monsters wear jeans and trainers and hoodies, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
look like us because they are us really. And I
they
think
are.
that they're not set apart. So I think it was fascinating. It was fascinating and horrifying. And I do think the police were given a really hard time in this film, justifiably in some cases, but in other ways, I'm thinking, were they really that bad? Because these people are not the police officers involved in the investigation. As my experience shows me, was that they genuinely want to get the right guy. They don't want to get the wrong person, and so you've still got the nutter out there. They want to solve these crimes. They want to protect women, and because they went down this wrong path with this Wearside Jack in part of the inquiry, um, women were killed and women were sort of brutalized because of this wrong line of the investigation.
So,
But
so
I don't think they did it willfully. I think they genuinely wanted to get the right guy. They were
yeah,
just so desperate that they weren't looking at the whole picture.
but I guess that there is a reason for this to happen because, for instance, you had the story that happened in I think it was this Sarah Everard in
Yes,
London like a couple of years ago, where it seems like the some of the same mistakes were made again.
get made. Yeah,
Yeah,
assumptions are made early on,
yeah,
and you don't follow the facts or you don't follow the evidence.
yeah. You don't follow the evidence, or there's something institutional that means that you turn a blind eye and let somebody carry on, even though, like, so so I guess that there's a reason for this to be made. There's a reason for them
Yeah,
to come out and to tell this story again and to say, "Hey, look, the more things change," and
yeah.
I guess that there is a reason for that, and I
And you have to
applaud it.
hold these people to account. I
Yeah,
think that's why they had an investigation. You have to hold these investigations to account to
it,
teach people, to learn from these things.
yeah,
And
yeah, and
if lessons aren't learned, then you think, where are we going with with
yes.
justice in this country in some ways
And
or
it's
the
one of
world?
these things where I'm happy something like this gets made. I think it's good that it gets made, but I will probably never watch it.
No, and I
uh,
can't say it's entertainment. I mean, I hate the use of true crime as entertainment. I mean, I
yeah,
do
I
read
know.
crime novels, and I sometimes read cozy crime novels, and I always tend to read them set in a sort of period setting,
Yeah,
because I don't read modern crime or this old sort of forensic crime sort of stuff, because I don't find that the least bit entertaining, because it's too.
it's
I
too
just
real.
don't. It's
Yeah,
too real. I just don't. And so this, I think, I was drawn to it one because it's something I remember. It's part of the world I remember. I know that world of sort of police investigations, even though I only sort of touched on murders, yeah, rarely in my career. But I know how crimes are investigated. So I find that aspect of it really intriguing to me. Um,
okay, okay, cool. Before I ask for your star rating, it just occurred to me because obviously I was just talking about crime novels sometimes being too real and therefore not
yeah.
being a bit exploitative or glorifying of the crime. I wondered there must be like and you should know because you read a lot of books and stuff like that. There must be a line of literature where it's kind of like a detective novel but set in a fantasy realm. So a detective novel, but with orcs and elves
Yeah,
and wizards and all
absolutely.
that kind of stuff.
Fantasy. You do get fantasy detectives and wizards and all sorts of things going. Yeah, you do get that.
Okay,
There's sort
okay,
of
cool.
genres within genres. There's like, yeah,
Okay,
chance.
cool.
Yeah,
That
there
I
are.
might just have found my new thing, but
Yeah.
but okay. So with that, I mean, obviously, it's I think good that it was done, and you said that it sounds like it was done respectfully. How
Yeah.
many stars would you give this in the end? Like at the
I
end of it?
sort of struggle with this because I think it's, if you're interested in that, in sort of true crime done sensitively to the victims of this crime and their families, and with your eyes wide open, you're not trying to glamorize one side or the other. You don't glamorize
Yes.
the policing aspect. You don't glamorize the crime. I think they handled that really well. So I would, for that, I'll probably give it a 4. But in
Okay.
terms of entertainment, the content, I can't see it as entertainment personally. I find it's just, I don't find true crime entertaining. But I found this drama, for all that, really fascinating
Yeah.
and moving. So I would give it a 4. I mean, if they had slipped and made it focus too much on him, focus too much on the actual nature of the crimes, it would go way down. But I think for me, they got that balance between trying to be fair, and sensitive, and looking at the women who some of them make choices because they had no choices,
Yeah.
and those choices maybe led them into situations where their lives were imperiled, and others just chose to walk home on one evening.
Yeah.
Um, After dark, which should not be a dangerous thing to do in any society or in any age, should it? So yeah, I would give it a 4. But I would say don't watch it if you want to have a jolly lark. Watch it if you want to look at this and come away with it feeling a little bit shell shocked afterwards, maybe.
If you want to grapple with humanity and what the rubbish that we do to each other, yeah. All right, cool. So 4 stars for The Long Shadow. Um, so on that, I don't even know whether that's the thing. I don't know whether it's a depressing note or whether it's a hopeful note that at
Well,
least.
yeah, I will say the reason it's called the Long Shadow is even though these events were like 30 odd years ago, we still talk about those events because it's cast a long shadow.
Yeah, and one of the things that they said about when it comes to glamorizing it, they apparently with this they did a lot of consulting with the families of the victims. They
Yeah.
did a lot of consulting with the families of the victims beforehand, and that's why. And part of that consulting is why there is no the words Yorkshire and Ripper are not in the title of this show.
Yeah.
Because the families were like, no, if you say that, you give it more oxygen, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like glamorizing and building a myth around this man, and so they were like, please don't do that. So they ended up going, okay, cool, no, that's it. We're not going to do that. We're not going to say it. We're not going to be like blazzing it over, going,
And I don't think
ooh,
they refer to the investigations don't refer to him as that. You see the newspaper headlines, and that's the only references to that. I think they
yeah,
use the term maybe once or twice,
mm,
but it's not as if it's the way he's referred to.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
not. Yeah, because I shy away from using it because I'm thinking, yeah,
yes. So